We are convened as the Provo City School Board of Education, meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah, and we will begin with a roll call. I'm Jennifer Partridge, Board President.
Gina Hales, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Monica Tuones, Student Board Member.
Emily Harrison, Board Member.
Karen McCabe, Board Member.
Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Okay, and we want to welcome all of our guests and our other staff and everyone who's here with us today, so thank you. Do we have a motion to start our study session?
I move we start our study session.
Motion made by Board Member Van Wagenen. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Boyce. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're in study session. And we will begin with our board member training by Board Member Melanie Hall.
Bonnie Simmons, project. So this was good because we actually have a public hearing today.
Did it really land like this?
Yes.
I purposely put it there.
Oh, okay, I was gonna say,
like, okay, we'll do this.
This is a sign.
So next,
Good job,
next
Gina.
slide. So we're going to talk about public hearings first. So next slide. Utah school boards may hold hearings. Some hearings are typically held in closed sessions, such as hearings related to security, employee discipline, termination, or real estate. There might be other options, but that's one reason the public is not invited to those. But public hearings, on the other hand, include a variety of hearings required by law to allow citizens to voice their concern and opinions. Public hearings are open meetings held by local school boards to share information and collect public input, often to meet legal requirements. Unlike regular meetings, hearings focus on gathering citizen viewpoints. Legal counsel can help determine when hearings are necessary. And so some examples are budget hearings, boundary change hearings, tax levies that require truth in taxation hearings, amendment of a tax levy, or proposed school closure. And next, bonding authority.
Wait, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, about hearings. I'm curious about the timing. I feel like the timing of these hearings is often at the time that a vote is taking place. And I just feel like it would make more sense to do them earlier in that process, to actually have that hearing in a way that informs over time a little bit. I just wanted to make that comment.
That might be dependent on what state law is.
Sure. Yeah.
You would still have to have a public hearing the night that you take a vote.
Okay.
You
But
could
that's-
choose
oh,
to
you
have
do.
one
I
before
see.
too.
Okay,
Well,
which
that
is
is
what
what
we've been
community
taking
meetings are.
public
Sure.
And we've
input.
had our other
Yeah.
meetings and
Right. Okay.
hearings.
I
It's
just
not the official.
But just
meeting,
as I
so-
look through all of these, I'm like, if that hearing happens the night of, anyway, so I agree.
Okay, next slide. So we have two different types of bonding authority. First one is general obligation, or you'll hear it sometimes called as a GO bond. It does require voter approval. The repayment source is property taxes. The purpose is used for major school construction, renovations, or large capital improvements. The key features are backed by the full taxing power of the school board district, making them lower risk and offering low interest rates. And the second one are lease revenue bonds. They are not required to have a voter approval. The repayment source is a lease payment from school districts to a bonding authority through property tax increase. The purpose is used when school district partners with the local school government or bonding authority to finance projects. And the key features are structured as a lease to own arrangement, often used to bypass debt limitations. And the boards can only do up to $200 million this way every 3 years. All right, truth in taxation. Truth in taxation is a property tax law designed to prevent local governments from collecting more property tax revenue just because property tax values increase. It ensures transparency and requires public hearings before tax rates are increased. So how it works. When property values rise, Utah's truth in taxation law automatically lowers the tax rate so that the government collects the same total revenue as the previous year, excluding new growth. So we don't get a windfall like people think we do.
Right. That came up in our last meeting.
Yeah. If a taxing entity such as a school district or city wants more revenue in the previous year, it must, one, propose a tax increase, mail notices, and then hold a public hearing. And then key points, property tax revenue does not automatically increase with rising home values. The process ensures transparency and public input before any tax rate increase. The county auditor calculates the new certified tax rate, and the last time we issued it was in 2022. Any questions?
Can you just remind us, like in 2022, what were the specific things that we were targeting with the increase?
I think that was salary.
Teacher, there was some security, there were textbooks, so there were a few things.
Like I think the teacher salary, I remember being one of the key points of that.
Alright, is that it?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. You've covered a lot in a short amount of time.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
Nicely
Good.
done.
Thank you. Alright, now we have item E, student travel for Provo High Ballroom. We'll turn to Wendy again here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Colin,
come on up. Calling from Provo High.
Hello.
So if you will stand at the front and then just give a summary of the trip, because they've seen the old itinerary. I have sent them an
the new one?
updated one, so
Yeah.
just highlight some of those
Okay.
things, and then they'll ask you a few questions.
Perfect. We are planning a trip, a performance tour to San Francisco, California, March 28th through March 31st. So we would leave after school on Friday the 28th, fly into San Francisco, rent 4 vehicles, and then go to our hotel to get set up and get ourselves settled. On Saturday, the plan is to, and actually I just got confirmation today, is to perform at Six Flags theme park. They have an open space area where they'd be able to set up the sound. Our students would be able to perform all of our pieces in front of an audience that's coming and going throughout the park. And it's, from what I've been told, it's a really good visual area. So while people are waiting in line, they could watch the performance. And so we'd be there Saturday. On Sunday, we would do a little bit of sightseeing, go tour Alcatraz, come back to Pier 39, do a performance on the pier in front of all the guests there, and then do some more sightseeing throughout the city. Monday, we would go to, the plan is to go to a elementary school. I cannot remember the name of it, but a couple of our students, they have cousins who go to that school. So the mother that's helping me plan this, it's her sister's boys. So we'd do a performance there in the morning, and then we would go to Stanford University to meet with their ballroom program. We have our national competition coming up in a couple weeks, and it's held at BYU at the Marriott Center. And their director will be here, so he and I are going to connect and talk about like doing a master class and like the kind of performance we do for each other, and get more of a idea of what their program is like, but also tour the school as well to let the students see more what colleges are like outside of Utah, because they're all very familiar with UVU, BYU, all the ones here, but this is an opportunity to see outside of Utah. And then we'd fly home that evening back here into Provo. And so that's the overview.
Okay.
Yeah.
Questions?
I got many kids. We're gonna go.
22.
Yeah, I'm curious on Pier 39, are you down at the end of the wharf where that little stage is?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty small stage.
So they have that stage, but they also said there's like a central area
There
as
is.
well.
Yeah, there
And so
is.
they're willing to let us set up there too. So that way everyone who's eating or who's around
Yeah, there's
could
all
watch
this.
us. Yeah.
That's great.
Yep.
That's really cool.
I recognize it's coming to us a little late just because we were trying to get details
Yeah.
figured out, right? But how long have the families known about this trip so that they can prepare?
We went over this back in September.
Okay.
Yeah, so we had our full meeting with all the parents, and we were able to discuss that in September. And then as plans have been going on, we've let them know back in December, January. So we've just been keeping them informed as we've been going on.
And they had a fundraiser opportunity to
Yeah.
put money towards?
Yep, we hold a competition every year at Provo High. It's a big 2-day event that it's from what I've been told, it's the largest high school held competition, ballroom competition, where we have teams from all over the state come, individuals from all over the state, and studios. And so the bulk of the money that we make from that, that's our fundraiser. Yeah, and then the students also have opportunities to raise money on their own by working concessions at BYU basketball games. We work with the concessions there all the time, so part of our fundraising also comes from the football games that the team works every year. And then the money that we get from football games comes directly to the program, and those who work the basketball games, the money comes back and then it gets spread out to the students and their fees, especially for those who are going on tour and all that.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, we'll vote on this in the business meeting tonight.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Yeah,
coming.
thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, next we'll turn to Wendy for our policy review.
I'm gonna cast Bonnie to go.
Sometimes it doesn't make me.
Okay, so I did create a little summary that actually I really this one a little bit smaller maybe. That I did load onto Board Docs so you can kind of look at it if that's helpful to you. But I also wanted to have the policy over on the side, so if you have specific questions I can pull that up as well. So policy committee reviewed a policy that came from the state. It's on child sexual abuse and human trafficking prevention education. We did recommend a change in this policy number as they took this to our team because we have already allotted that 5155 is going to be an update of our sexual harassment policy for employees. So I just bumped that to 5160, so you'll note that. This is a new policy, and it does state that once every 3 years we're providing this as child sexual abuse and human trafficking. Lisa had asked the question if we could just automatically do this within the first year of hire, but the state puts us on a rotation. So you do human trafficking, you do child sexual abuse, and then you also do trauma-informed education. And so that, because those videos and things are pretty traumatic, that you're doing one set of those each year. Our safe schools policy, however, does discuss the importance of being a mandatory reporter and what that looks like and those requirements. And that's given to every single employee every single year. And we do talk about the reporting process and where they go to report it. It's just not the state's really in-depth training that's there. USBA creates the materials for us, and then once they view it on the safe schools, that's how we track who actually completes that. So our recommendation would be, we would just put this on the all-day board meeting because we try to keep them up for a month. This is a new policy. We can post it. This is something we're already doing. It's just to line it out more specifically. Policy 5020 is our personnel policy. This is tied to Procedure 5. Hiring standards and practices, talks about background checks. There's just a couple of clarifications that came in through this updated policy. We did add some definitions. Our employees are actually warned when they apply. I don't know if warned is the best thing, but we disclose to them that we're going to gather their information and they're giving us permission to actually do a criminal background check, to look at different things based on, you know, all of the things to keep students safe. It also states in line 67 through 69 that we check the license status of all people that are applying for a licensed position, and that the district does pay for the background check for the non-licensed employees and volunteers. It lines 114 through 126 just lists all the concerns that could come up that could flag a particular candidate. It doesn't necessarily mean that candidate won't be hired. In some cases it absolutely means that, but in other cases, if it was something that happened like 10 years prior, they haven't had any repeat offenses, it didn't involve, you know, violence against another human being, something like that, then there's some different pieces that can be put in place there. The employee is always notified of their disqualification. They can request a review and provide a response, so they are given due process in that. And that once you're part of the district, there's ongoing monitoring, so we are notified if anyone gets arrested. You know, when people are like, well, how do we know those things? All of that comes through. We're notified if anybody's license is flagged. All of that takes place, and then that ends when the employee ends their employment with us. Any questions on that one?
We're already doing this pretty much, it's just codifying, okay.
It's just making sure that people understand that we're checking licenses and that it's continuing, that we can actually ask prior supervisors for information. In the policy, one of the things that comes up sometimes is people won't put their current supervisor down. We will always go and seek out a current supervisor, and we have permission to do that under the law. Like, that's a requirement. And people will sometimes be like, well, I didn't write them down. And it's like, it doesn't matter. You signed this form that says that we have the ability to do that. So, policy 5020, procedure 7 is also about personnel and about nepotism. That basically you can't hire a family member and supervise them and evaluate them. It's defined as a family member. They define it very specifically, or a household member. I actually went in and looked at state statute because Melanie had asked a question about step family members. They have to live in the same household for that to be considered under that law. If for some reason a district employee is supervising a person who is a relative, there are specific conditions that have to exist for that. This is mostly for rural school districts, really small areas. That would not be applicable in Provo, where there was some really strange position that we needed and we had nobody who was qualified to do it. But they cannot, the supervisor cannot, if they end up supervising the person, they cannot recommend them for salary increases nor be responsible for their performance. So that has to be assigned to somebody else. Doesn't matter if it's state or federal funds, it's the same. And then it does list some exceptions. We have to have written records. Those things need to be disclosed to the Board of Education.
We don't need to vote on these, right?
No, the procedures we don't need to. I will probably make sure that the association has signed off on all of these before we upload them. I know they've been sent out. I just want to make sure that we have their check on that and that they're okay with all of those pieces. 5020, procedure 8 is hiring preference of veterans and veteran spouses. It actually gives a formula if they're taking an examination of some sort to qualify for a particular position. So it talks about what those, it's a 5% or 10% depending on what their veteran status is. If it's not for an examination, then those preferences are given in terms of the interview. If there are two candidates that are equally qualified and one is a veteran, you hire the veteran.
That's state law?
Yeah, it's state law. Any
Wouldn't
questions?
it be federal law too?
I don't know if it's federal law. I think it's up to the states to determine if they want to give preference to veterans. Just most states do. I don't remember that being federal law. But that doesn't mean it's not, Terry. I can find out for you though.
But it's in our procedure because
It's in our
law.
procedure because it's state law. So. Policy 6600, procedure 3 is a specific policy tied to the drug testing of bus drivers. We already have a policy in place for policy 5200 that talks about a drug-free workplace. This is just really specific to bus drivers, and it goes through all of the same procedures, like if you have reasonable suspicion, but because a bus driver is in the position of protecting the safety of students, if they test positive, they're terminated. Like, that's what happens. Other employees can also be terminated depending on the scope of their employment, and notice in the policy it has exceptions if, for example, the employee has disclosed that they have a condition and that they're seeking treatment, then there are certain exceptions that go in to protect that particular employee. And Jason, you can interrupt me if I'm saying anything wrong and be like, that's not true. Okay. He's been saying I've been doing great all day. He's been making me feel really good, so that's good. Let's see. If an employee tests positive, we notify them. And if it's a urine test, it states that specifically they can request an additional test for that. And obviously, if we're pulling individuals outside of their work time to do the test, then we compensate them for that. Questions on this one?
Isn't, I'm sorry, maybe I missed this, but because a bus driver has to have a special driver's license, so they already
Yes.
have to be drug tested for that driver's license when they get it? Jason's shaking his head, yes.
Yes.
This practice has been in place for a long time, and the state just sent this out to codify it. We didn't have anything that was specifically stated for bus drivers, but what you're stating has been the the state's practice for a long time.
I learn something new every single Thank you. Okay, policy 3500 is actually a new policy. This is a policy that regulates extracurricular activities. We went in and Daryl helped me craft this particular policy, and I can actually pull it up. Let's see if my eyes will work. Here we go. That's the correct one, yeah. So we wanted to really have support for the idea that what is our purpose of extracurricular activities. We recognize that extracurricular activities are very valuable for students. We know that they do better in school. We know that they're connected to school. They have lots of trusted adults. It helps them build self-confidence. We added some definitions about extracurricular activities, coaches, and also volunteers. I know on line 51, the policy committee would like us to add, you'll see that highlighted there on my copy, that we want to add extracurricular advisors and volunteers, because we do sometimes, once in a while, we will have a volunteer advisor that's on staff. It talks about our expectations, which, by the way, are also reinforced in our code of conduct policy. We are keeping that as a separate procedure, and we'll have that. It's currently listed as procedure 2 to that policy. It'll now go to procedure 1 because the other procedures got absorbed into that policy. I think it's policy, I can't remember what number it is. 50, no, 5090. It is 5090, okay. The other thing that we've added into this that kind of falls under the policy that we talked about last time about students' rights of, well, it's employees' right of conscience, but students, last year we passed a policy about students' right of conscience. We wanted to reiterate this in the extracurricular activities piece because it allows a student, for example, if a uniform or a costume or something is being worn and that is not within the student's beliefs and it makes them uncomfortable, that the coach or advisor does have to provide an alternative and can't exclude the student from participating in that. We cleaned up some language on lines 1, I think it's 113 through 115. We just crossed that out and just said a student has the right to, while participating in a school-related activity, wear clothing as described in A above, and kind of goes through and gives those.
So you'll take that part out?
Yeah, we're just going to take, I was just,
I
you were
so,
right,
yeah.
it just really didn't make any sense, so. And then this part 5, starting on line 126, participation in extracurricular activities for private, home, online, charter, and scholarship students. It's referring to Utah Fits All scholarship students. We also have this addressed in our open enrollment policy. It has a separate section on extracurriculars. It basically states when a private school student can participate, they can participate with their boundary school as long as their private school does not offer that. That also applies, in fact, to a Utah Fits All student. So, for example, if we had a student say that was going to Ivy Hall, and let's say they wanted to play golf, and they didn't have a golf team there, but they lived in Provo High's boundaries, they could participate on Provo High's golf team, even though they're a UFA recipient. We just would not coordinate with the UFA. We're not a vendor, so they would just pay out of pocket for that particular event. If they're just a strict UFA student and they're not enrolled, they don't fall under that private school or online school setting, then they're not eligible because we have not set ourselves up as a vendor. And that's getting codified this legislative session, and we'll reference that new legislation when that goes into effect. So we'll put this up on the website and then have that out for comment and vote on it in the all-day board meeting. Questions about that policy?
Oh, go ahead, Ned.
Just for the one you talked about before this, the clothing for extracurriculars.
Yeah.
What is for jewelry? Because I know a lot of athletes, they'll wear chains that have a cross on it, but like how does that coincide with UHSAA rules?
That's a great question. I would say that it's probably safety is going to trump that in that particular situation. What they're really looking at is, say, for example, I'm thinking of like a drill team, which we don't have a drill team, but let's say it's drill or cheer, and they don't like, let's say it's cheer and they don't like how short the skirts are, they would have to be given the opportunity to order a cheer skirt that would be longer, and that would have to be provided. I think when it comes to jewelry, it becomes the safety issue that's there, and as soon as they compete, they can put that back on.
Okay.
So,
my question, so what you just said about a student who's at a private school but using Utah Fits All funds could come to us.
Yes.
With their own money.
Yes.
I don't see the wording here.
We have to fix that wording.
Okay.
Yes.
Because it makes it sound like if they receive any Utah Fits All, we can't.
We'll put a letter E in there that says if you're a UFA recipient and also a private school student, we will default to the private school student. We have a situation happening right now at one of our high schools, and we have authorized them to play because they're using their Utah Fits All at a private school. We don't offer that particular athlete.
Right.
Their school doesn't offer that, but they're competing for us.
Okay.
The procedure then, tied to 3,500 is really a new procedure that we put in place just in response to meeting with several parents from both the Timpview and Provo communities, talking about how they don't feel like they know who to take a complaint to. So that procedure just lines it out as to your first line is always your coach. If it in particular is dealing with your child and a situation that's happening, they can go to the athletic director, then they can go to the principal. From there, if they don't feel like that's resolved, then they go to the assistant superintendent, which is Daryl. If it's an elementary extracurricular activity, it would go to Jared in that process. It does reference in line 39 about them submitting, if they want an investigation held, then they have to submit that complaint in writing. And so we were talking as a policy committee, do we want to create a written complaint form that they would fill out that then kind of issues this, it kind of starts that process? Because sometimes people will send an email and it's like, hey, I have a concern, can we kind of talk about this? But I don't necessarily want to launch a full-scale investigation. We usually have a conversation and then we follow up with that. We probably need to make that a clearer process. When I was looking into other districts, they actually have a written complaint form that they fill out. So I don't know how you feel about that, but I think that might be just streamline that.
Very clear that at this point we are moving to the next.
We also in line 57 of the procedure talks about contacting the assistant superintendents. We're going to link that to that specific page that has their contact information. That way, because they might be like, well, where do I even find this? Like, who do I email? I don't even know what this is. So, and then if there's an appeal process, Jason and I will always be outside of that process. It'll always be Daryl or Jared. Jason Garrison may be pulled into a specific investigation proceeding. The principal's usually involved. And if for some reason they need to appeal it, Jason and I would stay outside of that and we would be the appeal. There was a question that was brought up in policy committee as to does the next layer of appeal need to go to the Board of Education? And because it's really dealing with the day-to-day operations of the district, it really shouldn't go to that level of appeal. The decision of the superintendent should be final there. But I'm hoping that we can get this information then when if this policy is adopted, then I'll work with Caleb and Shauna to start getting this information to parents. And as we meet with parent meetings starting for the 25-26 school year to say, here is your process. And this would be important even for community members that might not have, per se, an athlete that's participating in it, but they just feel like something isn't right and they want to bring it to our attention, to just create that really clear process of these are the people you contact, this is how you can make sure you're being heard. That was the feedback that we received, was that they didn't feel like that was really clear. Any questions? So our recommendation on this one is we put this up on the website. We would vote. You would vote on this policy at the March.
All right. Any questions?
Hutch, do you have any questions? I thought you might because it's extracurricular. I don't know.
Those who are not on policy committee, do you have any feedback about do we create a form for a formal complaint?
I think we should.
No, I think we should, because that makes it very clear that this is a formal complaint. And then it also streamlines the process, because even if they wrote something formal, there's probably more information that we were looking for. And I think it'll just streamline it and make it quicker for everything to be resolved.
Would that need to be procedure 2 is the form?
No, we can link it straight in, and we're doing all of these forms on the website now so that they're all ADA compliant and all the things.
Thank you, Shauna.
We have so many forms.
That's the end of our policies, right?
Yep, that's it.
Okay.
That's all we got.
Thank you. So we're not voting on anything today, but we have 5160 and 3500 that we'll
That's
vote
correct.
on in a month. So
That's correct.
all right, now item G, the 25-26 school year calendar.
I know
is
you're
back
excited to talk about this again. I'm really excited to talk about it again. Okay. Okay. So we voted on this last time, but because I'm just gonna blame Jason because he wasn't here last time, so he couldn't tell me like this wasn't gonna work. How's that? Just threw you right under the bus there, man. No. It became tricky to do. This became the discussion. So, and I apologize, but I'm gonna stand up here so I can show you some things. If we're gonna do a teacher comp day and it's gonna be before the start of school, then your teacher comp day is gonna be right here because this has to be day 1. Because the teacher comp day has to count as a day of instruction. I don't want that to be the teacher comp day because teachers are still gonna come into work and then they're not gonna feel like they actually got the comp day. So what we decided to do was to turn in this no school day right before Thanksgiving into the teacher comp day. So those teacher comp days count as a day of instruction. So they count as part of that 180 days. Okay, so we pulled that there, and then one of the pieces that we did here is I wanted to make sure that we did our professional development date, and we had this date as the end of first term, because in the past it's fallen here. Then teachers have to have their grades done before they leave for fall break, which I don't think is very fair. So especially when we're giving them 4 hours of that PD day they get to plan for things. So we're actually listing this as the end of term 1 and the PD day, so their grades would be due at midnight on that day. That seems to make a little bit more sense. So then we have our comp day here. And we did go ahead and push the semester here simply because otherwise our second quarter was going to end up being like 38 days. And so, and when we hear feedback from teachers, you're right, you're probably still not going to do any of the homework over Christmas break. I get that. But I might be wanting to grade some of that over Christmas break as a teacher. So we'll go ahead and end the quarter on this Friday. So students will come back 2, 3, 4, and I did work it out with 8A B days. So it does end, the semester will end on a B day so that it doesn't end on an A day. That also drives high school teachers really nuts. And then this Friday then will be a professional development day / preparation day, and grades will be due at midnight on that day. Yes, thanks, Devin. Okay, so that's the first semester.
So but we did change the date to start to August 13th.
Yes, we did change the date to start August 13th. We did. So we're starting on a Wednesday. Then our next piece of this is, so the next semester will start on the 12th. Go through, President's Day. Here we go. Here's the end of third quarter. Here's your teacher comp day on that Monday. So they'll get a 3-day weekend. Students would get a 4-day weekend there in March because this will be a professional development day. And actually that works out really nice because spring break's a little bit later because of how the week ends. So I think it's okay. That break will probably be welcome. So so the 18th will start fourth quarter and then go through. Will you scroll over, Devin, so we can see these counts right here? So our first term is 46, our second term is 46, our third term is 45, and our fourth term is 43. I couldn't quite get it right, but we got 88 and 92. That's about as balanced as we could get it at that point. So we're hoping, and then one of the pieces of feedback that I've been getting from the listening tours at the elementary schools is just please be careful about where you're putting parent-teacher conferences. So they're doing that this week, and they feel like all of their data is very old because they've done all of their middle of year stuff, even some of them before Christmas. And so when I have been out talking to them, they'd really like to see that kind of happening the last week of January. So we'll get that resolved, but we want to get those dates in front of principals before we finalize the parent-teacher conferences piece. And then our high school principals will finalize the A/B dating. But this is the calendar you'll vote on, and then we'll have all of the final details with everything within the next week. So, any questions about that? So yes, I'm sorry I'm making you vote on it again.
No, this is fantastic work though. Thanks for
Yes,
being
thank you to
creative
Jason,
and like
Maria.
persistent. I'm just going to put one more plug because I have gotten a few requests from parents would really like us to move to a calendar that looks like a regular calendar, and I don't know, I know we kind of mentioned it, I don't know if that's really
We're gonna do that
feasible.
next year. I didn't
No,
want to make him do that this
yeah,
year.
no, and that's perfect. I don't mean like right now,
Okay.
just putting it back out there that if that's something that's feasible.
We can do it. Just
But
what
it's
we
also,
put out to,
it's not
just what
like
we
a
put out
month.
for this.
Yeah, so when
to look at,
parents
right?
are referencing it, I think for some, until you, they rather
This
see
is
it
good
in
for
a
the
month.
district and
Yeah.
parents would like to see it.
I mean, yeah, some told me to, yeah, once you figure it out, it's fine, but others was like, hey, is there any way? So I'm just putting that there since we're
Gina?
I'm assuming PEA and PCSD are okay with it?
They voted on the dates, and those were not the dates that you guys voted on last time. So I have no idea how they're gonna feel about this.
Okay.
But I think it makes sense in the piece that you did. Why don't you tell them about the feedback that you got?
So when I went to PEA, the reps to meet with them, they were more concerned about not having a shorter second term than they were about where that date. And the dates that they had voted on, it was a split between the two of them. And so either one, they would have been fine.
I think they'll be okay, and I think they'll just appreciate the clarity and the trying to balance the length of the term. It doesn't matter as much in elementary, but it definitely really frustrates people that are teaching semester classes. So.
And they were grateful that we were even considering making sure that those were balanced. So.
Okay. All right. We'll vote on that tonight. Okay, now we'll turn it over to Nate Mitchell for
Do you want to?
information
I'm
on
gonna let you project. Is that
middle
okay?
of the year
Sure.
data.
Okay, sweet.
Here we go.
In response to changing the calendars over to look like calendars, I'm going to put in a petition that we make all national calendars on a spreadsheet, and then they'll be aligned.
It's like the metric system. Because you're like, that makes sense.
Problem solved, right?
Crack me up, Nate.
All right, we're going to dive into some of our middle of year data. That's the acronym there, MOI, if you haven't seen that before. Okay, so just to get kicked off, this is a correlation table between NWEA beginning of year. I know I said we're going to cover middle of year data, but this is a correlation between beginning of year NWEA and last year's RISE scores. Okay. And there's a specific reason why I have to do it that way. Number one is because I didn't have middle of year data yet. Our window doesn't close till the end of February. So my most complete and beginning of year is closest to that RISE window is why I used beginning of year for the correlation. Trying to make this a longer story shorter. Those correlations are fantastically high. This is Provo specific correlation data. NWEA produces national correlation data. They're seeing correlations between 0.72, which is a strong correlation, to 0.78, a little bit stronger. But our own Provo specific instance is phenomenal correlation data.
So just to make clear for everybody, correlation, what does that mean?
Okay.
That it's highly correlated.
Remember, talk like you're talking to fifth graders.
Yeah. Okay, fifth graders and then third graders. So correlation, you probably all heard the phrase correlation is not causation, but it is a prerequisite. So
now you're
yes,
okay. Now.
really.
Now we've got to fifth grade level, yeah.
So the correlation is just saying, can I use one test to predict the outcomes of another test? And the correlation ranges between -1 and +1. If you have a +1 correlation, it's a perfect predictor. So the closer I am to 1, the more accurate it is as a predictor. So I'm using NWEA to predict RISE outcomes. And what I hope to see is a 1 or something approaching that. 0.7 is considered a strong correlation. And then just a simple way to get to explanatory power is to square your correlation. There are instances where you would use a different metric to get to R squared. But I like this language a little bit better rather than using this decimal point to say that what it's doing is saying how much does NWEA explain the difference between these two scores. So when you have, again, 0.7 is strong, you square 0.7, you get 0.49, 50%. That's a strong explanatory power. So it's really the same thing, just in a different form. But we're having, 0.9 correlations, which means we have 80% explanatory power. Huge. Okay, so that's why we're including that. We're using NWEA to help us identify, are we pacing towards outcomes on our end of level assessments, that we want our interventions to help us grow towards those proficiency outcomes. Okay, NWEA, these are numbers again from beginning of the year. I did run it again for middle of the year, but I don't have those posted. We shaved off, on average, 1 minute and 20 seconds on testing time between beginning of year and middle of year. Yeah, killing it.
It all counts. It counts.
But so we do have our times by grade level and subject in those. We want to be responsive to teacher concerns about that. But by and large, we're seeing that tests can be completed in a class period. So we are helping teachers and, well, those who are proctoring the test understand some kind of proctoring tools that can help them pace students a little bit better. We see that our outliers really are, again, I think we talked about this before, it's really the outliers are our high-end students that are just anguishing over getting every question correct. And so giving teachers and proctors some tools to help students pace through that test a little bit quicker. I think
is there a time limit for the NWEA?
NWEA has no time limit. And so the difference there with like a RISE test, it will cut you off, right? And so our end of level state tests all have a time limit. Acadience is a little bit a different animal as it relates to time. It's different by grade level and test, and so it's really not a comparable as it relates to time. There's one-on-one measures that you use with Acadience. There's whole class instances with Acadience math, so it's a little harder to quantify that in one table. Okay, NWEA math growth. I'm going to spend a little bit of time here explaining just how to read this, and then I won't spend as much time on subsequent graphs. But what this is showing, oh, that's not my mouse.
I don't know why it's there. I can't make
just for fun.
Okay.
It's cute.
It's cute.
So I've got 3 different bars. I'm going to start here on this bar. What this is showing me is my achievement on NWEA at the beginning of the year. And then it's comparing it against my achievement at the end of year. Now, each of these bands are split up into quintiles, 5 different bands.
End of year or middle of year?
Middle of year.
Middle of year, right.
Sorry, thank you for the correction.
Right.
Beginning, middle.
Okay.
And these are national percentiles. So what NWEA would predict is that we have even distribution in each of these, right? 20%, 20% falling in those percentile bands. So any deviation from 20% tells us we're doing better or worse than national, right? So 17%, we are underperforming national in this really low category. That's good.
Right.
Yeah. So underperforming, underperforming, overperforming, overperforming. That's a good trend. Okay. What NWEA, and I'm referencing back to those correlations, how do we know how we're going to do on our end of level assessments? Correlation is really high, but what's the cut point? The cut point, it's a little bit different from grade level and subject area, but pretty consistently, I can say 60th percentile achievement predicts end of level proficiency. And that's all subject areas, all grade levels, with minor differences between those. So I can add these two and come up with, at the beginning of the year, we had 50% of our population, and this is math, that we would have predicted would have been proficient on the end of level test. Now, 60th percentile at the beginning of the year is not the same rigor as it is at the end of the year. The test does get harder, right? So it's possible, like we see here, that this isn't a true average, this is a median. Our median dropped, but our students didn't get dumber, right? They did progress, but they didn't progress at a pace that NWA would have predicted.
Which is what the growth, right, then is showing. It's like
Yes.
quite
Yep. Now that comes back to here, and it says if we wanted to stay at our 61st percentile median, we should have had 50th percentile growth, which we didn't have. So same thing, this is banded into 20th percentile kind of sections. It's a little bit different with growth. NWEA would actually predict that that whole bar would be yellow, right? Everybody would get 50th percentile growth. But what it's showing is how many of our students have really, on average, unexpectedly low growth, and then slightly less unexpectedly low growth as it goes that way. So we can see, we can take this median percentile and say from there I would expect that this number would drop from beginning of year to middle of year. So disappointing numbers from that NWEA, those two measures. But the advantage of NWEA gives us what we haven't had in the past, is this ability to identify growth at our extreme ends. So with our end of level assessments and with Acadience, those tests only pitch questions at grade level. So a student who's really underperforming, it's hard for them to see growth. Or students who are really overperforming, it's hard for them to know, am I growing, right? Because those assessments are only pitching questions at their grade level. We had a question from a teacher that said, I have my Acadience that says the student's really underperforming and that they have well below typical growth. NWEA also says they're way underperforming, but then NWEA says they have high growth. How do I square those two things? Which assessment should I believe in this case? Well, you can believe both, but what happens is with Acadience, it's only pitching if a 6th grader is performing at a kindergarten level. In order for it to translate into growth at a 6th grade level, that student has to grow all the way from kindergarten level up to 6th grade before it manifests in their growth. Whereas NWEA is going to pitch to them kindergarten level questions, right? And so they can start to see that growth. So it has a little wider tolerance on its ability to be able to predict that growth. All right. Any questions before I move on from this one?
Is there, in this, since NWEA is new, like, are there some pieces about, like, new to testing and using it that are maybe factoring into some of these numbers?
Yes. So teachers have really not had a fair, I would say, a fair training on how to interpret the data, how they can use that in their classrooms. We've had a little bit of a buy-in issue because of that. I have to own that aspect of it. We have had recently trainings with principals and with instructional coaches. And then to be fair to me is to say I haven't had data yet to even train them on.
Yeah,
so
and I'm just kind of curious. So that
For sure.
Asking about like the process of proctoring.
Yeah, I think I'm more asking specifically.
Navigating through a test.
Yes.
I see.
As opposed
Yes.
to necessarily the overall buy-in in what the test, what this will do for their classroom and their students, but also, is everyone proctoring it the right way? And
So in a logistics kind of conversation, what the structure we have, and it's different from last year. Last year we just had an assessment coordinator assigned at each building. This year we have an assessment team assigned at each building, and so then each of those teams have had an opportunity to have some training in the logistics of offering that. So we have a much more
like a better control.
Yes, a better supported group as it relates to that.
Because isn't it true that especially in like math, sometimes the computer, like where you do your work or where you show your work, like some of that is different based on the test, right? So there's probably
Yes.
kind of some of that that also will help us after we've done this a few times.
That's right. There is going to be a component of the error metric in
Right.
here is just familiarity with the test and the platform itself. But then there is also as I was mentioning, this buy-in concept, which I think will also get better with time. As we met with principals, and you'll see these scatter plots that we have at the end, we got huge buy-in from principals once they saw the power of those scatter plots. Now I put in here, and I always forget this, that with my Acadians online platform, I can only do grade level at a time. So I put this in here and forgot that this is not representative of the district. So this is just a single grade level. But what it's showing is from beginning of year to middle of year, how our students are performing, and this is Acadians Math. We see a slight tick. Again, this is just for first grade. I'm not going to belabor this one because I did mess up and not put the district on there. I'm going to slide over. I just added this. You won't have had this to preview. I just before we came into this meeting. So it's showing what our growth is between reading beginning of year, reading middle of year, math beginning of year, math middle of year. Slight increases. Really, the only standout is this kindergarten, which has a big jump. But all the others, slight increases and even slight decreases in Acadian scores across the board. Michelle is going to talk. We have our UELP goal that's dealing specifically with first grade Acadians math and reading, and talk about what we're doing with our UELP goals around specifically that grade level. But again, not the numbers
Do we know why we went from 62 to 49?
Those math drops.
In second grade.
From 62 to 49. So the math conversation that we're having right now is the Acadians math has a blueprint. So every benchmark assessment, let's say there's 25 questions on the beginning of year assessment. Each question will be mapped, and it'll give teachers a blueprint. It says question 10 is covering this indicator for this grade level. And that stays the same. Beginning of year, middle of year, end of year. It doesn't change. The only thing that changes with the math assessment is the expectation of the number of questions that students get right in the same amount of time. So really it's not that they dropped, it's that they aren't increasing their fluency in math, the number of questions that they can get right in the small amount of time. So as we evaluate this, the next steps for us is to really help teachers understand that the Acadians math test, there's a big fluency component to it. Obviously there needs to be understanding, or we can't get the proficiency side, but in order to progress across the school year, you also need fluency.
Isn't it, am I saying this accurately in that we haven't always done Acadians math either, correct? And so this is also a new thing for teachers.
That's right.
So Acadians reading they've been doing for a long time, but not the math.
Yeah,
So
but
math has
into
been
math, right?
Into math becomes the NWEA math. That's a different math.
That's right. So we have a curriculum assessment called Into Math Growth that we used historically. HMH is the company that owns that curriculum. They purchased the whole company, NWEA, and they supplanted the Into Math Growth with their NWEA math assessment. Acadians Math is our state required assessment for K3. We have been required to give the Acadians Math assessment for the past 3 years. This year, we're asking teachers to proctor it. In previous years, we had paraprofessionals proctoring that test for us. So that's, any other questions on this?
I'm just trying to keep in my brain. Does Acadians reading go through 6th, or does it switch to Rise in the middle there?
So this is state Acadians is required K3.
And then it's Rise.
And then we opt to do Acadians for 6.
Okay. Thanks.
where
Yep.
if we didn't opt, we would just be doing RISE.
That's right.
But
Yes.
now, so 4 to 6 are doing Acadians and RISE.
That's right.
Got it.
And Acadians, remember, is done 3 times a year. So if you're gonna take away Acadians reading and you're gonna take away those points,
Yeah.
then you've gotta have something else that you're helping teachers work
Yeah.
with.
So it's not
And
like taking it away.
So you can't take it away and just say, well, we got RISE, cause then we have no idea how they're doing on reading. So there has to be another component.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and each assessment
Different.
has very different purposes and use cases. The Acadians is really the only standardized formative assessment that we have where we can say, here's a specific need for a student. NWA doesn't do that. Our end of level assessments don't do that.
So NWEAs are only district required assessment. Or you could say the 4 through 6 Acadians
Yes.
is kind of a district.
Yes.
Yes,
So we
that's
have,
right.
we would replace it with something else. So those are the 2.
That's right.
The 1.5, okay.
Yep. All right. Where was I? Okay. So NWEA reading, right at that 50th percentile growth from beginning of year to middle of year, we stayed. And that's reflected by this growth metric that we have there.
Most of our elementary schools are not doing NWEA reading. They're only doing NWEA math. So this would be primarily secondary schools, right? 7th,
That's right.
8th, 9th, and 10th.
That's right. Amelia has done reading across all their grade levels. And then I think Provost did reading starting in 3rd grade.
And I think there were a couple of teachers at Rock Canyon that did the same thing too.
Yeah. Yeah, but
The elementary numbers are small.
primarily this is a secondary has been participating in the reading assessment. Which also reminds me, when I say add these 2 numbers together to get end of level predictive results, kindergarten is included in this number, which doesn't take an end of level assessment. So we really do need to get this down to a grade level before we start having those conversations about predicting outcomes on an end of level assessment.
Nate, you got about 5 minutes.
Okay, language usage.
So exciting.
It's exciting.
That's what I wish.
Language usage just below that 50th percentile, and again, we saw a decline from beginning of year to middle of year. Science, we're right at that 50th percentile, 69th to 68th, pretty consistent.
Is this also mostly secondary?
Yes. Yep. So NWEA math is the only one where we required it at the elementary level. So we really didn't have any participation in elementary for our science tests. Okay. Man, I should have just started with this because this is the cool stuff.
So exciting.
All right.
I love this.
This is student level data, obviously anonymized, and I cherry picked particular classrooms to look at specific patterns, right? What we're looking at here is percentile achievement on my x-axis and percentile growth on my y-axis, right? We had those stacked bar graphs that we were looking at before, so I can take my achievement is a stacked bar graph here, 20th percentile bands across the bottom, and then I can take my growth stacked bar graph, stand it up on its end here, and now I have this scatter plot. I mentioned that 60th percentile achievement is what we're predicting for students to be proficient on their end of level tests. So what's cool about this is I could slide that bar from the 50th percentile line over that 60th percentile line, and I can see which students NWA is predicting to be proficient on that end of level assessment. And then based on their achievement, I can see what is their growth, right? So if this was my classroom and I saw this, I would be very worried about these students. They started with low growth and started with low achievement and have no growth.
Yep.
This is the worst quadrant to be in, right? Awesome for these kiddos up here, but something else is going on. This is, if I was a principal, I'd have concerns. I'd want to have a need conversation with this teacher. Okay, this is students who walked into the classroom with high achievement, but by and large, I'm not getting the growth out of those kiddos. we've never had the ability to do this. To be able to say, what is the growth of our high achieving students? Our end of level assessments just don't do it. When we use Acadians, we're saying their benchmark. Okay, we're going to put them in win time, we're going to do some sort of enrichment for them, but we're not identifying what their level is, what's the next thing for those kiddos. Even though this would be alarming for me as a principal or as a teacher, I have metrics now that I can actually make some steps, right? We're shining spotlights on these issues. Okay, students that walked in, high achieving, also high growth. This is a huge celebration, right? As a principal, I might want this teacher sharing in a faculty meeting or something. What are you doing? How are you getting those kinds of results? This is so cool.
It's so good.
So all of these graphs were taken from one department, a middle school language arts team. They had the full gamut of patterns that are up here. These are students who walked in the door low performing and just rocked it, right? This is the teacher we need to celebrate. Oftentimes with the data that we've had in the past, we're comparing proficiency to proficiency. We never would have been able to identify this teacher as the standout teacher because their scores would have been lower than the teacher that had all students in the yellow. Right? Yeah. Now I can say, based on the students you received, what did you do with them? Never had this. Right? So when we have conversations with teachers about this, when we have conversations with principals about this, it's a light bulb, right? They're like, this is what I've been asking for. We now just have it. So although I wasn't super thrilled with our results from beginning of year to middle of year, it's the first time we've ever been able to look at that kind of data. We're now setting some intervention plans, being able to set goals around it. There is, I'll just celebrate one of our schools right now, Independence High School, sat down with every student in their advisory class and set NWEA goals for beginning of year to middle of year. It wasn't true of every student, but every grade level cluster was up here in the orange.
Whoa, that's awesome.
That was awesome. Another shout out, I would say, to Provost. They had a lot of high growth instances there as we look through that data. So identifying who our experts are within our own district is powerful, right? Now we can start to create some professional development where we're celebrating our own success and we're elevating our own experts.
Hey, we have questions for Nate.
They have so many questions.
I'll ask him later.
Well, this is phenomenal information.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So we're excited. Thank you, Nate.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we are going to save the Board of Life report for business meeting. We'll quickly go to item J, lease revenue bond. Devin?
So this will just take a second. I'm just going to go through what our process will be tonight so you can understand some of the duplicative nature of it. So we have our bond council in Zions. There's brand new requirements that came into place this year in towards the end of last year. The board has to approve the issuance first. So we have the public hearing for the board and the board approval first. And the language and everything is the same other than we are going to be approving as the board and for the board approval and approving as the municipal building authority as in the municipal building authority part, and there will be a public input in each or public hearing in each. So you could hear the same thing twice. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that's going to look like. This is the first time we've done 2 public hearings for it, but this is what the new requirement is. So both of them, I've added the language for you, Jennifer, in at the beginning of when we start the public hearings, and then what the motions are in each of those lines. What was recommended from our legal counsel on that. So it's still at 70 million. We will issue them sometime in the next few months, just as we, looking for the optimal time where we can get optimal interest, but we also won't run into our time constraints, and make sure that we can, maybe if we wait until right after the beginning of the year, we can wait even an additional year before we bump up property taxes. What we did in the presentation was what the worst case scenario was if I issued them in March, after the 30 days. So, any questions? And Wendy came up with a great one of why are we the municipal building authority? Well, somebody, whenever they created it as the municipal building authority. Technically, we should be just a local building authority because we are not a municipality, but our legal name is the Provo School District Municipal Building Authority. And changing a legal name with the IRS is pain. So we'll just keep it with that right now. Yes.
This is a question, I guess, for both you and Jennifer. Then I noticed it goes like public input and then public hearing. So the public input will be if they're here to speak on something other than the bonds.
Okay, and then okay, great. Thank you. I was wondering how that would all kind of blend.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know that
hopefully say that clearly, and if not,
well.
Gina will nudge me and
That's fine.
clarify.
Okay.
Someone else will nudge me.
All right. Thank you.
I have a question here.
Oh, sorry, Meg. I did not
So
remember.
logistically, like when the motion is made, because we'll be making two different motions for the issuance and the voting as a municipal.
So, yep, issuance for the bond board and then issuance for the municipal building authority.
Got it. If we want to speak to the motion, I guess either one of those, both of them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Like if we
yeah,
want to
either
speak
way.
in both of those, you can speak in.
You can speak in both of them or one of them.
I'd rather not speak in municipal, do both, but.
Yeah. So whichever one you want.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Item K we will say for business meeting as well in the interest of time. And then do we have a motion to adjourn our study session?
Move that we adjourn the study session.
Okay, motion made by Board Member Hall. We are adjourned and we will try to start promptly at 6 p.m. in the